Good afternoon. This is Kathleen Drew, Chair of the Washington Energy Facility Site Evaluation Council. I'm calling our meeting today, June 21st, to order. Ms. Owens, will you please call the roll?
Department of Commerce.
Excused.
Department of Ecology.
Excused.
Department of Fish and Wildlife. Department of Natural Resources.
Lenny Young, present.
Utilities and Transportation Commission.
Stacy Brewster, present.
For local government and optional state agencies, for the Horse Heaven Project, Department of Agriculture.
Derek Sanderson, present.
Benton County. I saw Ed on the line earlier. I'm not sure if he's muted. Moving on to Badger Mountain, Douglas County.
Jordan Julio, Douglas County, present.
Thank you. For the Assistant Attorney General, John Thompson.
John Thompson, present.
Administrative Law Judge, Adam Torum.
I'm here on the line.
Is Laura Bradley on the line? For FSEC Council Staff, Sonia Bumpus.
Sonia Bumpus, present.
Amy Hofkemeyer.
Present.
Amy Moon.
Amy Moon, present.
Joe Wood.
Joseph Wood, present.
Patty Betts.
Patty Betts, present.
Stu Henderson.
Stuart Henderson here.
Andrea Grantham.
Andrea Grantham, present.
Dave Walker.
Dave Walker, present.
For our operational updates, Kittitas Valley Wind Project. Wild Horse Wind Power Project.
Jennifer Galbraith, present.
Grays Harbor Energy Center.
Bruce Sharon, present.
Chehalis Generation Facility.
Present.
Columbia Generating Station and WNP 1 and 4.
Alicia Nahra Paxton, present.
Columbia Solar.
Bowen Hurd, present.
Council for the Environment, Bill Sherman.
Bill Sherman's present. However, to clarify, Sarah Reineveld, who is also on the line, is Council for the Environment for Horse Heaven and for High Top in Australia, and Megan Salome, who will be joining us later, is Council for the Environment for Badger Mountain and will be for Watoma Solar when we have an opportunity to send an appointment letter.
Okay, great. Thank you. I've got that down. Chair, I believe there is a quorum for the council and for the additional projects, Horse Heaven and Benton and Badger Mountain.
I actually am not sure we have a quorum for the council. However, we do not have council action, so we can proceed.
Thank you.
Because I count 3 for the council. I did not hear that Mr. Livingston was on the line. So we would have a quorum for Horse Heaven and for Badger Mountain, but not for our regular council. But again, as we do not have actions planned, that won't inhibit our work today. So moving forward then, I think what I need to do perhaps is to forego the approval of the monthly minutes and the informational minutes until we do have a quorum. And I will say we will move forward on our proposed agenda. We will take the minutes up in our July meeting. So let's move on then to project and operational updates. Kittitas Valley Wind Project, that would be Amy Moon, Ms. Moon.
Yes, thank you, Council Chair Drew and Council. For the record, this is Amy Moon providing an update for Eric Melbardis of Kittitas Valley. Eric is not, or Mr. Melbardis is not available to present the update. And I'm going to direct your attention to the council packet for a written copy of his update. There are no non-routine items to report. And if you look at his written update, he provides the power generated at 30,958 megawatt hours, capacity factor of 41% with no incidents, no sound complaints, and no shadow flicker complaints. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Moving on to the Wild Horse Wind Facility, Ms. Galbraith.
Yes, thank you, Chair and council members. This is Jennifer Galbraith with Puget Sound Energy at the Wild Horse Wind Facility. And
Ms. Galbraith, your
yes.
sound is echoing there.
I know. I hear that. I'm not sure why. Interesting.
I think you're good now.
Shall I try to continue?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. So again, this is Jennifer Galbraith with Puget Sound Energy at the Wild Horse Wind Facility, and I have no non-routine updates for the month of May. Thank you.
Thank you. It may be that someone is not muted who is on this call in this meeting. So if you can check, make sure you are muted if you're not speaking. That will help us hear those who are speaking more clearly. Okay. Moving on to the Chehalis Generation Facility, Mr. Schnitker.
Good afternoon, Chair Drew, council members, and staff. This is Stefano Schnitker, Operations Manager for the Chehalis Generation Facility. The Chehalis plant was in a planned maintenance outage for the month of May. And other than that, I have nothing else non-routine to report.
Thank you. Moving on to the Grays Harbor Energy update, Mr. Sharon.
Chair Drew, council members, F6 staff, good afternoon. This is Chris Sharon, a plant manager from Grays Harbor Energy Center. For the month of May, we have no new or non-routine items to report, and we did finish our maintenance outage May 13th.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to Columbia Generating Station in Washington and WNP Washington Nuclear Project 1 and 4, WNP 1 and 4. We have a new person reporting to us today, Felicia Nahera Paxton. Is that how you pronounce your name?
It is. Thank you. You did a great job. I appreciate it.
Sure.
I appreciate the introduction. Good afternoon, Chair Drew, FSIC Council and staff. I am speaking on behalf of Columbia Generating Station. We had normal operations. In May of 2022, we had one update regarding CGS workers and contractors wrapping up the dry cask storage campaign on May 27th. And that is all. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to Columbia Solar, Mr. Hurd.
Great. Good afternoon, Chair Drew, council members, and FSX staff. This is Owen Hurd from Tuso Energy reporting on the Columbia Solar projects. On Penstemon, all communications issues with the interconnection have now been resolved and the plant is operational. On Camas, we achieved mechanical completion back in March and are just finishing up the testing and pre-commissioning activities. Substantial completion is expected shortly, either at the end of this month or into July. Utica, we finally completed all the pile remediation and installation of the structures and the modules. The schedule is looking like mechanical completion potentially by the end of this month, but more likely July, and then substantial completion, I think early August, which is, I think, different than it was when I submitted this, but yeah. Beyond that, we're updating the planting plans, which will be submitted to FSEC for review shortly, and the site restoration financial assurance for the facility has been provided to FSEC from Greenbacker. And so with this in place, my understanding is that all the provisions of the SC transfer are complete.
That is correct, and we do have the letter from Ms. Bumpus in the council packets saying that we have received and reviewed the standby trust agreement and letters of credit from Greenbacker, and that we have determined these instruments are sufficient and hereby release TUSO from financial responsibility for these projects.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Next, we have the Horse Heaven Wind Project.
Good afternoon, Council Chair Drew and council members. For the record, this is Amy Moon providing a State Environmental Policy Act update on the Horse Heaven Wind Project. In May, FSEC staff continued to work closely with our contractor Golder on the preparation of the draft environmental impact statement, which people shorten to draft EIS. Most of the draft EIS has been through a first review, and our focus is on completing second draft reviews, refinement of the draft EIS chapters, and further development of proposed minimization and mitigation opportunities. Amy Hofkemeyer will present an update on the schedule and FSEC's work with the Washington Attorney General's office regarding the adjudication plans. Does the council have any questions?
Are there any questions from council members? We will now move on to the DEIS schedule update. Ms. Hofkemeyer.
Thank you, Chair Drew and Ms. Moon. Good afternoon. For the record, this is Amy Hofkemeyer. I do have an update for you on the draft EIS schedule. We are intending to issue the DEIS in August of this year. FSEC is working closely with our contracted agencies and seeking some additional tribal input for the EIS. And the incorporation of this information has extended the drafting of some sections of the EIS as well as the staff's review of some sections. We are anticipating a 30-day public comment period upon issuance of the EIS. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions for Ms. Hofkemeyer?
Yeah, this is Lenny Young. I have a question. To what extent will the DEIS address greenhouse gas emissions and carbon?
We do have information in our air resources section of the draft DEIS where we will cover some discussions to those topics, to greenhouse gases and carbon.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Are there any other questions, or should I go on to the next part of my update?
Go ahead.
Okay. I also have a brief adjudication update before handing the floor over to Judge Torum. FSEC staff have created a SharePoint document library in which we will be providing both SEPA and adjudication materials for the council's review. So when exhibits or other materials are ready for the council to review, they'll be replaced in the council SharePoint library for this project. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Judge Torum, you are now going to give us a presentation on adjudication.
Yes, good afternoon, Chair Drew and Horse Heaven council members. In fact, for all of our council members, I'm going to give you a brief, very high level overview of what to expect when we actually commence an adjudication for the Horse Heaven Wind project or any of the other projects that might make it all the way to a contested adjudication. If you've looked at our WACs, Chapter 46330 governs adjudicative proceedings, and as you may know from other quasi-judicial proceedings, we go forward under FSEC using the Administrative Procedure Act, or the APA. What's really important for you to know as council members is that our WAC makes the council as a whole the presiding officer. It allows for us to utilize an administrative law judge to handle the procedural things, but the ultimate decision on each of these projects comes from you, the individual council members, acting individually and as a whole. So you truly are the judges. What's your role in an adjudication? It's a little different than today, where you're listening for input, and although we're not seeing any council action today, when you take action under an adjudication, your role is an evaluator of evidence, and you are the ultimate decision makers. This means that there's going to be, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, not today, limits on your ability to communicate with each other and limits on your ability to communicate with participants and the public. It's what we call limits on ex parte communication. I'll give you a detailed handout on that in the future and a detailed briefing, but just know as your role changes in adjudication, your most important aspect to keep clear is you have to be fair, you have to be impartial in your fact finding, you've got to stay open-minded about the ultimate outcome of things, and you've got to be free from any undue influence. So keeping those roles in mind, what is an adjudication and how does it kick off? You'll see this in the weeks ahead, probably sometime in July or early August, when the council issues an order commencing adjudicative proceeding. That's the formal notice we give to all of the public that we're taking up an application and setting a formal hearing under the APA. We'll identify the parties to each of one of these projects. All of you that are members of the council, your agency is going to be a party and may be actively participating in it. The applicant will be a party. Council for Environment will also be a party. But then there come the interveners. These are other members of the public or groups that think they have a sufficient and discrete interest in some or all aspects of a proposed project that they want to be actively involved as litigants, not just giving a public comment, but calling witnesses, cross-examining witnesses, and acting through counsel typically at the hearing to influence things and present evidence for you to consider. There will be in that order commencing adjudicative proceeding a deadline for petitions for intervention to be filed, and then those will be ruled upon by the council, and various interveners will be granted status and given status as to what their limitations might be if they're on a particular topic. If they're aligned with other parties, they'll be grouped together so we can have an efficient proceeding. There are a number of details about how that occurs in the order commencing adjudicative proceeding, and those are taken from our WAC as well and our RCWs. At this point, the council hasn't done anything, but I, as the administrative law judge for Horse Heaven, will then schedule a pre-hearing conference with those interveners and other parties. And at that time, we'll start to really put dates on a calendar and coordinate with the council members to make sure we know exactly when the hearing is going to be held, what method it's going to be held by. Probably, given our current state of government and post-COVID restrictions, it'll be a hybrid hearing or an entirely virtual hearing. What do you have to do? Show up, be there, be ready. And what does it mean to be ready? Those pre-hearing conferences are going to set a schedule for parties to present their evidence, some of which will be presented in advance. Parties typically in these proceedings have witnesses that give detailed expert opinions, and they give the foundation for those topics that they're testifying on. They give their background and qualifications, and they submit that in writing in advance as what's called pre-filed testimony. That's probably how the Horse Heaven Wind project is going to go ahead. The parties will most likely choose to present their expert testimony direct exam in advance. They'll call the witness at the hearing and they'll adopt that written testimony. Maybe they'll add a few more things, but you've had to have read that in advance so you're ready to understand the context of the other party's cross-examination and ready to ask your own questions. You'll be involved at some point, probably using that document library that Amy referenced earlier to have access to pre-filed testimony and to prepare your questions. The APA hearing is where the parties bring everything together. That's the formal hearing, and again, you should plan on attending each and every hearing session so you can hear the evidence, see the evidence, and have that opportunity to ask questions. If you're absent, you're definitely going to be required to review a transcript from any missed session, and that can be a bit tedious, but if necessary, if you have an excused absence, it makes sure that you're fully informed by the time we get to the end of the hearing. We'll be scheduling substantive presentations by topic. If you take a look at WAC 463-30-300, that has a general suggestion of how the council expects to conduct the hearing by topic and schedule those things. And I'll be working with the parties, with the applicant, with Council for the Environment, and with the interveners to set up when those presentations will be going forward. We'll also have a separate public comment hearing so that members of the public have a chance to give you their input in 1, 2, or 3 minute bursts. We'll see how that goes depending on how many people sign up. Then deliberations. Once all the evidence is in, the council has to put it all together. The applicant and the interveners will have done their job. Now it's up to us as a council, it's up to you as a council to make sure you've taken in all that evidence and evaluate it in conjunction with any of the legal briefing that's provided as well. I hear we're getting a bit of an echo, so if people can check their mute button. The idea for those deliberations is to resolve each and every contested issue presented to the council as a result of the application and the adjudication. You're going to be discussing approval versus rejection of an application and all the appropriate conditions you would suggest on the project and on the individual sites. And finally, that all gets reduced to writing as a recommendation to the governor. The recommendation has a lot of moving parts, and on top of the narrative that sets out who the parties were and who the issues, what issues were raised and how the council resolved them, there'll be findings of fact and conclusions of law. And then there will also be the final environmental impact statement. The DEIS that has been mentioned multiple times leading up to today and is supposed to come out in August, that will be after the public comment and everything else turned into a final environmental impact statement, or FEIS, and that will also go in the recommendation to the governor. So the adjudication track, it's informed by SEPA and the DEIS, but those are two separate tracks that come together again in the recommendation to the governor. So what do you take from this? We're really at the point where we're ready to tell council members soon we'll be scheduling a time for the adjudication. How much time, I can't tell you. It depends on the number of witnesses and contested issues, but it could be a week, it could be longer, it could be a little bit shorter. But in the ballpark of a full week of a hearing, multiple hours per day and some evenings, we'll be scheduling something called an adjudication. And what I've just given you is really the 30,000-foot overview of what to expect. But again, your role, be there, evaluate, and you individually judge and then discuss and deliberate that evidence. Chair Drew, I hope that that gives them an idea of what's coming in this case and perhaps in Badger Mountain and others to follow.
Thank you. I will ask council members, that was a lot of information from Judge Torum. Are there any questions at this point? Understanding that we will give more details and more opportunities for questions as it goes forward.
Judge Torum, this is Lenny Young with DNR. Could you speak specifically to limits on our communications within our own organization? In my case, within my own agency.
Yes, Mr. Young, at this point, as we get ready to have the adjudication, you're a member of the council and also doing your own job in your agency. For all of the council members, you know the Horse Heaven project is something you can't discuss actively with other members of your agency that might be taking a position as a party in the case. They can't have any communication with you that might influence your deliberations that doesn't occur in an open FSEC meeting as part of the adjudication or one of these monthly meetings. So if you're at DNR specific meetings that might bring up the Horse Heaven project, be sure to identify yourself as a FSEC council member, and therefore you might have to step out of the room and not participate in any substantive discussions about this project that's pending before your role as a council member. You could be in the room for things that just come up procedurally, such as talking about when they might be scheduling a discussion or their dates to participate in the hearing. But if it's beyond procedural matters, you'd have to step out and excuse yourself. If you do find yourself in a position where you've heard things, step out of the room, but then come back to the council and you'll have a chance to report, oh, I was at a meeting, I accidentally didn't realize they were going to go into substance, but I did step out of the room. That kind of report can cure an ex parte communication and make sure you're not unintentionally disqualified from participating in some or all of the ongoing adjudication. I'll get you some more detailed rules and suggestions on how to avoid ex parte communications that are improper, and give you a handout on that in the weeks ahead for all council members to review. But just consider that you can't hear anything and participate in anything that might unduly influence your participation in FSEC's adjudication. I hope, Mr. Young, that gives you a little flavor of what to avoid when you're back at doing your regular duties at DNR.
Yes, it does. Thank you. Would the same guidance generally apply to internal written communications and reports and memos and such?
I would think yes. I would defer a little bit to your legal counsel or to Attorney General John Thompson on specific items. If you're receiving routine communications as part of a pass around the agency and you've got to sign off on pieces, you might ask your supervisors to take you off anything that circulates on a project pending before FSEC for a contended adjudication. It just depends on the nature of what's in those written communications. If they're advocating a DNR position that will be taken up before FSEC, that's a pretty clear line. If they're just mentioning who they're hiring to do their expert testimony, you're going to know that in the course of things. So that would be a procedural item, I would think. If you have specific questions, you can contact me and or Mr. Thompson, and we can go over it with you together and have a much more, here's what's happening specifically, and give it more specific advice.
Thank you, sir. Much appreciated.
You're welcome.
Are there other questions from Horse Heaven Wind Project council members?
This is Ed Roche. I just have one question for the judge. Would you have what you said in the 2-minute overview you gave in a written document of some sort that you could share?
I do, Mr. Brost. I just have a very brief bullet point outline that I can make sure you get the most updated copy of. I'll submit that to the FSEC manager and let her circulate that to council members. There will also be, it's still in process of being updated from the last one used in 2015, an adjudication introduction to the process, and that will also include the ex parte communication guidelines that we've mentioned today. So if you'd like the bullet point outline, that's available now, and I'll circulate the updated copy of that to FSEC staff to pass along.
Super, that'd be great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Again, we're hearing typing, so whoever's typing, please mute. Thank you. Before we leave the topic of the Horse Heaven Wind Project, I want to let the council know. Oh, I'm hearing an echo on myself there. Okay. And all those who are present at this meeting that we did take an action during last monthly meeting, which is the order on land use consistency. And we were unable to hear from Councilman Brost during the proceeding because of technical difficulties, but he did send an email asking that his vote be recorded as a no vote. And so I wanted to say that into the record because that is how it is reflected following those communications. So moving on then, I think, are we ready to move on to our next agenda item? I think we are. Goose Prairie Solar Project, and I believe that is Mr. Wood.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Drew, FSEC Council and staff. This is Joe Wood providing the monthly update for Goose Prairie Solar Project in Yakima County, Washington. FSEC staff continues to work with Brookfield, the new owner of Goose Prairie LLC, on pre-construction surveys and plans. Recently, a rare plant survey was performed. We don't know the results of that yet, but the results of that will inform the habitat mitigation plan and other pre-construction and construction plans. In terms of construction schedule, I thought it was worth mentioning that Brookfield hopes to be in the fall of 2022 if possible, but a target date of completion is actually before the end of 2023. And so that's largely due to apparently some supply chain issues, but construction schedule certainly depends on timely submission of draft plans and modifications to those. That said, FSEC will continue to work with Brookfield to obtain all the required surveys and needed pre-construction construction plans, and we'll continue to update the council as things progress. And that's all I have for today. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Wood? Okay, thank you. Moving on to our next item on the agenda is Badger Mountain Project update. Ms. Hofkemeyer.
Thank you, Chair Drew. Again, this is Amy Hofkemeyer for the record. FSEC staff are working in review of the SEPA scoping comments and with the SEPA responsible official to narrow the resources to be examined for the draft EIS. FSEC staff are also coordinating with the applicant and Department of Natural Resources to potentially schedule a site visit in the coming weeks as needed. Are there any questions?
And that would be a site visit for the staff?
For FSEC staff to attend with the applicant and the Department of Natural Resources in support of cultural resources information.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that purpose. We will plan to have a council site visit in the future, but not during this phase of the project. I just wanted to clarify that. Are there any other questions for Ms. Hofkemeyer? Okay, thank you. Moving on to the Whistling Ridge project update, Ms. Hofkemeyer.
Thank you. FSEC staff are waiting for the certificate holder to submit the remaining materials for the SCA amendment request. They have let us know that they will need a little bit more time to put that together, and we will keep the council up to date as we receive more information.
Thank you. Moving on to High Top and Ostria, Ms. Hofkemeyer.
Thank you. On June 1st, FSEC held the public informational meeting and the land use consistency hearing. We had 3 speakers at the informational meeting and 1 at the land use consistency hearing. No comments were received online for these meetings. FSEC is continuing its review of the application in coordination with our contracted agencies. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions? And again, we will review and approve the minutes for those two projects at, for those two meetings of that project at the next council meeting, since we are unable to do so today. Okay, thank you. And then moving on to Wautoma Solar Project update, Ms. Hofkemeyer.
Thank you. FSEC staff are currently working on our review of this application and are coordinating with our contracted agencies for their review. Staff are also working to schedule the public informational meeting and land use consistency hearings for this project. So if you have not already heard from FSEC staff about your availability, we will be reaching out shortly to determine what everybody's schedules are for those meetings.
Do we have roughly a time frame that we are looking at for those meetings?
Our time frame, I'm afraid the date for the 60-day timeline is escaping me, but I want to say mid to late August.
Okay, and that's because of the fact that we received the application, but we received the deposit by the applicant later, and we are going by the deposit, the date of the deposit from the applicant for the 60-day time frame. Is that correct?
Correct. Technically, the deposit is not technically, or the application is not technically received in full until FSEC has received the deposit. And so that's where we start calculating our timelines.
Thank you. I just wanted also the council members to have in mind an expectation of when those meetings might occur. So we're looking at mid to late August.
Correct. Are there any questions from council members at this time?
Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, thank you. And that concludes our agenda for today. So at this point, we will adjourn and we'll see everybody next month. Thank you for your time.